Great, thank you very much. El Monte, those of you familiar with it, it is just northwest of the 10 freeway and 605 freeway, about 110,000 people and just under 10 square miles. So we've had a lot of activity in El Monte, just like other cities in the western San Gabriel Valley area, but in a wide variety of types of developments. Industrial developments, you had a hotel, a Holiday Inn hotel that just opened up, different mixed-use projects, and different residential projects as well. But the one area that I did want to focus on today for this group is our downtown area. It's the historic kind of core of the city, and we recently just completed a plan for that area. So it really is where El Monte began, and really lends itself a lot of opportunities for future growth and future development and future investment. So the downtown portion of the city is really located near Santa Anita and Valley Boulevard, or southeast of that area. And so what my presentation is going to do is just go over downtown El Monte, a little bit of background of the area, a little bit about the project and the plan and how it was developed, kind of get the understanding of kind of the background of how plans like this are formed. Also talk about the community engagement and the different tools we use to reach out to the community, including people in your profession, to make sure that the plan that we put together made sense and worked. And then, of course, a summary of the plan itself and how it affects, what can be built on the property, and then also some of the things that have already started as far as implementation of the plan. So a little bit about the history of downtown El Monte. El Monte was founded in the 1850s. It's known as the end of the Santa Fe Trail, so it has a really long history. And the Main Street at that time was called Main Street, was really established in the late 1800s. And by the 1920s, it was the main business hub of that area. So, before shopping malls and freeways and everything else, there was Main Street in El Monte. And it wasn't until the 1930s that it really became Valley Boulevard. Valley Boulevard was made up of all these separate streets, and then they connected them, and then El Monte's Main Street was connected to other parts of Valley Boulevard, and the street name was changed. But it was a historic heart of the area. You can see the picture on the upper left, diagonal parking, little antique cars, and a lot of shops as well. There was also a lot of regional events that occurred there as well. There was the Legion Stadium, which has since been demolished, but there were a lot of historic events that occurred in that stadium area as well. What they did in the 1950s was they widened the street, and then in the 1960s, they actually constructed a bypass. So if you drive inside the area, you would notice that Valley Boulevard kind of curves and then reconnects, and the Valley Mall, which is what is known now, then became rebranded as Valley Mall. But the area was still served by transit, still served by transit today. You have the El Monte bus station, and then you also have the Metrolink station. So the stations are noted in the lower right, which is today, in the little pink dots. And the upper left is what it looked like in the 1940s. You can see Valley Boulevard went straight through. The pink dot was the old red car line that connected El Monte to downtown. So El Monte's always been a big transportation hub. Here's some old pictures of Main Street. You can see there was a JCPenney's. That building is still there and has a lot of elements of traditional JCPenney's that you would see in downtowns throughout America. But the lower right is when they changed the street to a Valley Mall, so they added diagonal parking and landscaping and so forth. So Valley Mall was done in the 60s, but it did start to decline in the 70s and 80s. And there really hasn't been much activity in Valley Mall since then. So there were several plans that were done, but were never really implemented. So this was really, we saw this as an opportunity to really be a really good plan that could then be implemented, and then not just look at the Valley Mall or Main Street area, but the areas around it as well. So here's some current photographs of the area. You can see the old Penny's building is divided up into a lot of little shops. There's one of the old theaters that is also divided up into retail shops and some offices. And then you see kind of the entrances that has the sign kind of welcoming people to downtown El Monte. So one of the first things we did when we did the plan was we kind of identified, okay, where are their buildings, when are they growing, how did the area grow? And as you can see, most of the area was developed between the 1920 and 1960. But there is other things that were developed all the way up into the year 2000. So, but most of the older structures are along Valley Mall, but a lot of them have been changed so much that it's kind of hard to tell kind of maybe what they look like originally. So one of the things is that Metro then said, had funds available to do plans for areas that were near transit. And so downtown El Monte was an ideal candidate because you have two significant transit hubs. You have the bus station, which is just to the west of the downtown area. It's the busiest bus station west of Chicago in the United States. It handles over 20,000 people a day. And then you also have the Metrolink station, which is the busiest line on the Metrolink network as well. And then downtown is literally right in between both of those. So it was really an ideal candidate to do a plan to kind of feed off of those transit amenities, and then also that you had your downtown area in the middle of it. So you can see both areas on the map show the transit and how within 5 minutes you pretty much cover the entire downtown area. Okay. The other thing we looked at was, what's existing now, where are there opportunities, where is there surface parking that would be a good opportunity to develop something, where is there a current project underway and so forth. And you can see once we started mapping all these opportunities, the entire map became covered with triangles and circles and stars. So, so we knew that there was something special here to work with. So also the funding of it, plans like this can be very expensive and can take a while to do. So this plan, the grant was for a little over $400,000. So the total plan though was over $500,000 and took about almost 4 years to complete. So this is typical for plans like this, because of all the consultant fees and a lot of the environmental fees to do the studies and so forth cost a lot of money. But most of this was covered through the grant, as well as city fees, and then we used some transit fees as well to cover some of the costs as well. So some of the gas tax fees went towards covering the plan. And the community engagement, that was a really, really big part of this plan, like it is for all planners, because we really want to make sure that the plan makes sense, that we reach out to the community, make sure we're hearing kind of what the needs are, and then also reaching out to the business people and the property owners of the area as well to make sure that what is developed works for everybody. So we had a lot of one-on-one meetings, we had workshops, we met with our council subcommittee frequently as well. We also had a special meeting that just dealt with economic development professionals because we wanted to make sure the economics of the plan worked. We had different study sessions, different public hearings as well, and so we did a lot of outreach. I think the area that was maybe the hardest to reach out to was the property owners because a lot of them did not live in the immediate area, so it was a little bit harder to reach out to them, but we were able to specifically target some of the key property owners to make sure that we heard from them. So this just kind of some of the things that we heard. There was a lot of consistent themes. People kind of had different memories or experiences in downtown. Some of the older residents remembered it from when it was still a hub of activity for the area, and some of the newer participants didn't have that knowledge, but still identified as something that could serve a higher importance. Definitely a call for more restaurants, for outdoor dining, for night activities, to improve connections, to improve walkability, to add housing, to do streetscape improvements as well. Of course, we did a SWOT analysis of the area where we looked at strengths and weaknesses and opportunities and threats. And there was a lot of discussion about parking. How many spaces are there? Are they well kept? Are the lots safe? Are they conveniently located? There's a lot of vacant land in the area, which can be seen as an opportunity because you can do new development on it. But then it was also, weakness because people visit the area, it isn't as inviting, or there could be maintenance issues with vacant properties as well. There's a large daytime population, but then not a very active nighttime population. So those are all things that were kind of looked at as far as kind of what is our starting point in doing this plan. And there are a lot of strengths in this area. The retail spaces along Valley Mall are, for the most part, leased up. And there's a lot of daytime population. If you go there on a Sunday morning, there's families walking around as well. And for other downtown areas, that may not be the case. And then we also put together guiding principles based on the feedback that we received. So really it talked about the area being, a hub of activity, be an inviting place to shop and do entertainment, to provide more housing, to improve transit, and then to also improve the entryways and access and identity of the space. So when people are anywhere in the area, they know they're in downtown, or they know where to go downtown, or they know they're already in downtown. So it's very, there's better signage and landmarks that kind of identify the area. And so the specific plan, it covers more than just how big is the lot and what can I put on it, but it talks about the public area as far as how to improve the public space, other amenities, and then it talks about kind of how it's implemented and so forth as well. And it's a one-stop document. So if someone wants to sell a property or buy a property or open up a business, they really only need to go to that one document. They don't need to go to like 5 or 6 different documents to figure out what they can do with their property. It's all in one space, in one place. So the one thing we did too was then, even though the downtown area isn't large, it's about 115 acres, it was divided up into a couple sub-areas. In particular, you have the Main Street area, which is in the orange, and then you have your station areas, or your areas near the transit, which are in blue, and then kind of the areas in between. So, then each of those areas have a little bit different standards as far as how much intensity can go on the property. So we'll start with the Main Street area because that's like the heart of it. And so the one thing is that it does have smaller buildings. The idea is to keep the scale of that lower, 2 to 3 stories, to kind of keep that small town feel and to maintain the walkability. At key corners, maybe you could go higher as well to add the upper floor housing as well. One of the other things too is, because right now it is of course named Valley Mall, but to rename it to oops, did I do that? I thought only our computer at work does that, so this is nice to know that others do that too. So to change it from Valley Mall to Main Street, that would be one of the first tasks as well. So, and here's like some photographs of the area. So you can see, the buildings are, smaller in scale. It's definitely much more walkable. There's wider sidewalks. So it has a lot of the bones in place to create that. There's even a little playground area that the city recently, put new equipment on that's very heavily used. You have a lot of families in this area as well. And here's some, you can see in the upper right, that's really at a key corner intersection. So there are some vacant buildings that are, would be ideal locations for new space. We do have a conceptual proposal for the building to the upper right, to use the ground floor for retail, and then to have the back portion of it for an office and media building, and then to actually extend the second story to make it larger as well. So we just got plans in for that. And then if you go on the eastern end of it, there are some taller office buildings in that area as well. So there is, again, a strong daytime population, but there would be an opportunity for more office space as well in that area. So the station sub-area, this is where really the most intensity is looked at. You're talking densities of up to 80 units per acre for like mixed-use residential. And you have really talking about improving kind of the access to the rail or bus station as well. And then here you're talking about up to 6 stories in height. So it's definitely a much taller area. So this is looking at kind of the area on the west side. There's actually a big development that's under construction right now. It's the Gateway Center, and it is on land just north of the bus station. And so what's under construction is about 550 residential units and 25,000 square feet of retail, up to 6 stories high. The building on the upper right is an affordable housing project, 132 units, that opened up recently. So the upper left is under construction right now. And then there's still opportunities for more development after that as well. This is just outside the downtown area, but it's definitely all connected. So this could kind of feed into the plan. The picture on the lower right is actually of a shopping center that used to house a Rite Aid that recently closed. And right now it's a traditional suburban shopping center, but that would also be ideal for more intense urban development, 4 to 6 stories, upper floor housing. I think could accommodate well over 100 or 200 units. And here's the area along the Metrolink station. This area is actually very underdeveloped. It's mostly surface parking lots. There were some old industrial buildings that have been torn down, so you have some vacant land over there as well. So this is really a good opportunity for future growth and future development as well. The Zocalo area just south of the downtown, looking at that being more of a kind of an arts district or cultural area. Here again, you have the street, which is Lexington, which has really small kind of buildings, but then you also have a lot of parking lots as well that you could do different types of developments, housing, some open space, and then also maybe some office development as well. And the Monte Vista area is the area that kind of rings the downtown. So this is more of a transitional area. So maybe not quite as intense, maybe commercial activity or housing activity. So it'd be kind of almost in between. But you could have development of up to 4 stories in these areas. So here you have in the upper left, you have a new shopping center that recently opened up with the Superior Market. It's doing very well. If you've been over there, the parking lot's usually full, and they're still filling up some of the larger tenant spaces. You have a lot of county-owned property as well that could potentially be developed. And then you have a couple of housing projects that are under construction right now as well. But you can see like the upper left, actually, those buildings have just recently been demolished. So you have a vacant parcel that's the city's working with an affordable housing company to do a project on that site. The plan also looks at building form and standards. So if someone is looking at developing in the site, the plan gives a framework of how the massing should work, how it should be set back, how it should be stepped back, how the architectural form should look, and really kind of helps give guidance on that. So we really want these to be helpful tools for people, not necessarily to dictate how things are done, but to help people develop projects. And then when we did the analysis for the area, we looked at up to 2,200 residential units and 500,000 square feet of commercial. So it can accommodate a lot of future growth. A lot of this, especially in the station areas closer to the rail. But we did the analysis of it. So for future projects, in many cases, they could build off of that existing analysis. So it would, in a sense, kind of streamline the process because they wouldn't have to start from scratch because a lot of the traffic analysis and other impacts and stuff like that have been evaluated for the whole specific plan. So there's an opportunity to kind of feed off of those existing studies. The one thing that we did look at as an incentive is you have, let's say, your base as how much you can build on a property, and then you could build above that. And then, but if you built above that, that would be, if you did certain improvements to the area or paid it to a fund. So what that does, it gives people opportunity to develop more on a site, but then also gives public amenities or public improvements, or puts funds into a fund that can be used to do that. So, because the plan talks about a lot of different street improvements and open space improvements, and those monies or improvements can then help support that. So just looking at the height, so I talked about this in each section, but you can see it goes up to like 6 stories in height in the more intense areas. The densities as well, or this is the floor area ratio as far as how much building square footage can go. And so again, that ranges lower at the Main Street area than higher by the rail stations. And then we have all the different kinds of maps that outline setbacks and all that kind of stuff as well. And permitted uses as well kind of varies from one area to the other. But again, we're looking at more pedestrian uses, neighborhood uses, regional uses, not auto-oriented uses per se, but restaurants and offices and so forth. So everything's listed very, very clearly for people to be able to follow. Parking is, of course, always a big issue on 2 sides. One is that we know that a lot of business people, want to have parking, convenient parking nearby, but then also that really increase the cost as well. So we do have reduced parking standards, both for residential and for commercial. And it's a more reduction if you're in the Main Street area or by the rail, and then a medium reduction if you're kind of on the outskirts of the area. But it does, and it gives a lot of other flexibility for parking because we do have a lot of public parking lots as well. But that was, of course, a big topic of conversation. And of course, it talks about design guidelines and, kind of the architecture of the buildings. A lot of discussion about, as I said, mobility and beautification, about how to improve the roadway, about doing open space, and then also about pedestrian and the bicycle network. So it really gives the framework of how all that stuff is done. So when a really large project comes in, it would have a blueprint of what are the things that the city's looking for, and and then that would help, expedite the process to get something approved and constructed. There's a section that talks about entryways as far as how to brand the downtown area and where that should be located. So you can see your pink bubbles are intersections that are kind of on the outskirts of the entryways of downtown. And implementation, of course, is a really, really big piece of this because we want to do a plan that would actually happen. We have like a task force that we're creating that would monitor the implementation of the plan. We identified all the different things that are basically deliverables or things that should be done in the plan, and then we prioritize them as well as far as a high priority or a low priority. And then we also identified sites for like there could be catalyst developments that can encourage subsequent development after that. So really, really big piece of that. And already some of the implementation stuff, some of the projects that we've seen, the buildings to the left is that gateway project across just to the west of Santa Anita. We have a Norm's restaurant that was recently approved. They just started construction on that at one of the entry points. The design works really well with the downtown, so the downtown has a lot of mid-century elements to it. So that was a great fit and a great way to kind of enter the downtown to see that building. And then you see we just did a street unveiling for Main Street. So that was at our kind of kickoff ceremony. So we have the new sign. So this year, actually, they're going to be doing the process of changing the street name to give businesses a chance to, update their business cards and to work with the post office and so forth. To the upper left is a new housing project. They're doing actually a grand opening for that this Saturday. It's by the Olsen Company, and so you can see it has, definitely a more urban look. Those are 3 stories, about 60 units on land that had been vacant for, I want to say since the 1970s. And then to the upper right is that pocket, that little park that was built. That's a good example of incorporating kind of open space in the area. So that concludes my presentation.